I'm standing here with Mike from Delaware, who I'm getting a lot of rants, from a lot of folks, often about government things. But finally, I've got someone who can rant about something else. And this is that you have more of a corporate issue. Tell me about your corporate concern.
Well, I work for a grocery store, working third shift, stocking overnight, and about this time last year, they decided they were going to get rid of our shift and make us well, they were going to split our shift in half. It had been about 3 months into working during the day, and I hated every minute of it. And someone asked me, like, hey, Mike, you're starting to like it? What's going on? And I made a joke that working during the day makes me want to blow my brains out. And I smiled and laughed afterwards, so I thought I made it clear that it was a joke. But about 3 days later, I got interrogated for 3 hours by the loss prevention guy. And it was about stuff about like what guns I own, how many, what I think about the president and government, and all kinds of stuff that isn't really relevant to work. And actually later, when I had to come back and have a meeting with the corporate people, they actually said that I said inappropriate things about the president in my statement I had to write up and give to them, which was pretty much when the guy Paul asked me what I felt about the president. So I said the president is a mass murderer, and he asked me which one, and I pretty much said there hasn't been a modern president that hasn't been. I would say to start practicing agorism and get as much money as they can into the black market instead of the status markets.
Max from North Carolina.
I'm a rights travel activist. What I specifically did was I took the license plate off my truck. I let the tag expire, and I gave back my driver's license and gave it back to the DMV. And so I was traveling around with my truck. Took me several months until I got pulled over, actually.
Really?
And I did get pulled over. I got 2 citations with 5 charges total. So I went to court, and I have a certain strategy that I use when I go to court. They ask me if I'm going to represent myself, and I say no, and I say I'm representing the legal person. I am a natural person, and I'm representing my legal person. So that's where I let them know where this is going to go. And the other strategy I use is I say I'm a non-resident.
Why do you do this?
I do it because it's right.
How practical?
I believe that if a man cannot govern himself and assume full responsibility for himself, then he will always be subject to the authority of other men. And he will always be deemed a slave, and he cannot and will not be free.
In a practical sense, how is this going to play out? Is this the most practical way to resist the government?
It's not resisting the government. I don't blame the government as such. I believe it's the intellect of the people. Because when you go into a court and you're using words, the judge knows what the meanings are of these words. Domicile, resident, passenger, motor vehicle, they know. But it's the people that don't know. The people are suffering because of lack of knowledge, which is somewhere stated in the Bible as well.
Traditionally, I've been one of the folks that gets a little bit impatient with any kind of even halfway complex legal argument. But recently, I think liberty activists have discovered how bogged down the courts are, and the fact that if you just fight in court, maybe fight is not even the right word, but the fact that you stand up for yourself, take up a little bit of the court's time, you're actually hitting the very weakest link of the government's chain. So that may be a benefit of what you're doing. Are you thinking in those terms at all, or are you just doing it almost out of instinct?
I'm doing it out of instinct, and I just don't believe that we need to change the government. I believe the government that is in place is doing the right thing, but we need to change our minds. We need to think about all these legal terms that we're using, and we need to study the law really efficiently so we can actually win in court, so we don't need to get a driver's license.
Rich from Manchester, oh no, I'm sorry, Rich from Keene.
Yep.
And you had some thoughts that we talked about this a year ago, and I thought it was so interesting I wanted to do an interview with you about it back then. Wasn't a good time, and I'm bringing it back up again a year later, and that is some interesting quotes from John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah, well, Keynes said, the best way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. And yes, I was reading that. That's the only part of this I'll use a teleprompter for, though. I'm not Obama. And what he's saying there is that there are three ways that you can finance a government. You can finance it by taxation, you can finance it by inflation, or you can finance it by conquest, basically by going out and taking things from other countries. One of the major ways to fund this government has been through inflation, and it works exactly as it works for a counterfeiter, where when a counterfeiter prints money and buys things with that money, he is taking up resources that should rightfully have gone to somebody else with money that they actually earned. But the counterfeiter has taken that, and by doing that he causes a general rise in prices, a very small one, but if a lot of people started doing it, it would be a real problem. That's why we can't just give poor people printing presses and let them print themselves out of their poverty.
But there was part of that quote that was especially interesting to me. Be careful, don't make so much movement there because it's shaking the camera around. But there was part of your quote that you were talking about a year ago where you said that back in Keynes' days, he said not 1 in a million people understood what he was doing. So yes. And that's changed now, hasn't it?
Absolutely. He said in another version of this quote, which unfortunately I wasn't able to find, he says that this brings all of the hidden economic forces to bear on the side of destruction in a way that not 1 man out of 1 million can diagnose. And basically, so few people really understand what inflation is and what is going on when you inflate, that the government can really steal your money without, or steal the value of your money without your ever knowing that it's going on.
It could, but now the numbers are much higher than 1 in a million. Now it's more like 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 to understand the problem of fiat money.
Yeah, Ron Paul has seen to that. He's been one of the few people who's been talking about fiat money for a long time, since the 1970s, and his recent popularity in 2008 and again in 2012 has really caused people to start educating themselves about what money is and what it means and what it's good for and what it's not good for. And that's important because money is the most important technological achievement of mankind. And when I say money, I mean the idea that you can use a common medium for trade, gold, silver, something of real value. But when you take that and you turn it into fiat money, which has no fixed value, no true value, then you can literally destroy the currency. You can drive prices up by printing a lot of money, and when you retract that money and cause a depression, you can then buy it up on the cheap if you're the guy who can predict inflation, which means if you're the guy who knows how much money is being printed.
But can you think of a way that there are these apparently evil people out there that are causing inflation, printing money, and so forth? Is there a way that they and their opponents, aka us, can come to some kind of a solution, some kind of a win-win compromise?
Well, I think we should compete in the marketplace. I think that they should, put out their inflation-based currency or their paper currency, and people should be allowed to use that if that's what they choose to use. But people should also be allowed to use gold, to use currency, or to use gold or silver, and to use them as currency. And what I mean when I say as currency, I mean without any taxes on converting back and forth to dollars. If you remove the taxes and you allow people to actually trade in gold and silver, then what you're going to see is the Federal Reserve will not be able to inflate the monetary supply and destroy the value of the currency, because people will just shift out of the currency. they won't be able to gain anything by doing it. Basically, you're eliminating legal tender laws, which force you to trade in one particular type of value only.
All right. Thanks for your time, Rich.
Groovy. Thanks.